Well, good morning, everybody from Storage Exchange. We have with us today Liam, Taylor, and Hunter. One of the hunters in storage because there's a couple of you guys out there now. I guess that's a popular name when you guys were all being born. Um, so introduce yourself. Whoever wants to go first. We're very casual. It should be a fun time. So let's enjoy it.
Well, appreciate it, James. Thanks for having us on. Obviously, I'm Hunter Molnar, managing director over here at Storage Exchange. I've been in the storage industry since about 2014 alongside Taylor. We got our start at Red Dot Storage. We raised and deployed about half a billion into the space across 180 assets, and then started Storage Exchange in 2019, really focusing on operator-centric underwriting, providing transparency in our deal flow. And I mean, we live and die and breathe in the secondary and tertiary market world. Obviously, we do deals across the broad spectrum. But that's kind of my background. I'm sure we'll get into more later here. Taylor,
Sure.
you want to introduce yourself?
Welcome.
Yeah, my name's Taylor Kahn. Also similar to Hunter, I started about a decade ago in storage and seen the growth and trajectory of storage from where it was 10 years ago when things were just starting to get automated and technology was starting to ramp up and before the secret of storage got out. I think everything kind of started to change around that 2019 time, and that's when we split off and started Storage Exchange. Brokerage that focused on secondary and tertiary markets for the most part. We dabble in the primaries as well. But very, very, very owner operator centric type underwriting. We sat on the investment committee for thousands of deals over the years, and we feel like we have a pretty good understanding of how buyers are looking at the deals, and I feel like we can relay it to sellers and operators in a digestible manner where I think we can create synergies between the two and try to bring the two sides together and make deals happen.
Wait.
And I'm Liam Duddy, Director of Investment Sales here at Storage Exchange. Been in the storage world for about 4 years now, coming up in May actually here. Got my start living in Austin, so I've focused on the Texas market for Storage Exchange. We've had a lot of success there. Going back to that, we've really been successful in the secondary, tertiary markets in Texas. There's been a lot of activity in those markets going back over the last 4 years, continuing to work into the primary markets there. But yeah, been 4 years, learned everything I know from Hunter and Taylor here. And going back to that is like that operator knowledge, that background that they brought with Red Dot to Storage Exchange, I really think has allowed me to grow and be successful in the industry.
So I've been a pain in your ass for all those 4 years then.
Yeah, and
No. Yeah.
glad we've connected, and you've been a good partner to us, and glad we've been able to get some deals done over the course of those 4 years for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I it's funny too because I didn't even know that you've only been in it 4 years because dealing with you at the beginning of when I was getting involved like heavily. Like I started about 2019, but I was just doing part-time touching base, like doing some bird dogging and stuff like that. And then when I really got involved with it, you were one of the first brokers that I had to deal with. I say had to deal with, but I
I
got
do. Yeah.
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
to deal with.
No offense taken.
Sorry. No, but I got to deal with and like I was green and hungry and still am hungry and still green because I like to learn everything I can. But like we worked on that one deal, it took us a year, right? And although it was a small deal, nothing like, we didn't win the lottery on that deal, but it's funny because I always use that scenario to people that are I'm mentoring or I'm talking to, and I say, look, sometimes you don't just get that deal right away. You got to work on it and you got to stick your ground and if it doesn't work at the time, it could come back to you, And I always say, look, it took me almost a year at one point to get one deal done and it wasn't it wasn't it wasn't the prettiest property either, right? So, with all that being said, you have to be tenacious, you have to be consistent and do a lot of follow up and check in with the people that you're talking to And I appreciate your patience with all that through it, because that just, that just solidified my ownership in properties, and partnerships. Like, it really helped me learn about having partners and investors and doing all that. And I think that property was my, well, I don't want to say third property, but my third deal.
Hmm.
So at that point, I think I had five properties, and then this would have been my sixth property. But I learned a lot, and I appreciate, and that's, I reached out to you guys right away as brokers, because I want to get you out there, for your services. In addition to that, like, I dealt with you guys, like, I know, then we went through and we did the one in July, right, this past year, and, and you and Hunter both know, like, woo, that was fun, right?
You don't
And
take it easy, huh? You like getting the hands dirty, and
I do, I really
down the
do.
fairway is not for you, huh?
And I tell you what, I find it challenging and exciting to get those deals that, when you guys look at a deal and go, I'm going to call James, because you're ready to pull your hair out looking at what's there, and I don't have to pull my hair out, right? And I kind of enjoy that, I really do. I enjoy those projects of sorts. And of course, I'm gonna pepper the questions out of everything in order to get to that part of the deal. But it is exciting, and honestly, not everybody wants that, and I'm glad that I'm that for you guys, and I could be that for whoever else, but I'm glad I'm that guy for you guys, that the first thing you think of is, well, this is going to be a nightmare. Let's call James. Like, I'm, as silly as that sounds, I'm excited about it, because there's good deals to be had if you're patient,
Hmm.
right?
For the value, I mean, that's where all the value is. Obviously, I mean, for the folks listening, think of a deal that's a little bit of an armpit. You got to pour a bunch of capex into it. You don't have a rent roll. You have to lease it up. You got to kick tenants out. But it's a great piece of real estate. There is no in-place management and huge upside. Obviously, that's where the value is. That's where all the value creation is. But it's that risk reward. Not every buyer has the risk tolerance to take on something like that and know that they're going to be eating it for a little bit, especially in a high interest rate environment, especially when you have months and months of interest carry. But I mean, it just depends on your investment thesis. If you're IRR driven or you want to get that huge value pop, then man, those are the deals for you. If you
I
want in place cash flow, put the hands back, then this James is not your guy.
no, no,
And
you
I
know
think
what?
on
I'm
I
eating
think
it
on
so
top
much
of
I
that,
probably have all of it on my shirt still, because we went on that one property that you guys brought, and you talk about the different markets, the secondary, tertiary markets and stuff, and and we went at an occupancy that we call it 48% when we bought it, but you guys know that we thought it might have been 48%, but we're solid now. I mean, and this is July, so July to now. So you're talking what, 8, 10 months or something, and we're a solid 70% occupancy, you
That
know,
deal is very, very quick.
right. However, there's still a lot more upside to come.
Oh, yeah.
And what I found was, it's not been easy. Like, and well, for the beginning, so the way my partnership works in that particular deal is that I am the numbers guy, and I'm the management operations guy. So my partner is all the construction. If it's broke, he fixes it, right? And he's 2 hours away, which I'm in New Jersey and it's in Texas. So he's able to go to the site and fix something, or send somebody out there because he owns a construction company. But now that it's up and running, it's not like, okay, my job's over, because it's not, because I have to meet with the third party management company, and I gotta, say, what are we doing about this, and how can we get more rates, and how can we do this, and do all that on the backside. But getting it to what I always said was, getting it to the dinner table was my part, and then making dessert and doing the dishes is both mine and my partners.
Well,
Because, like,
if you're looking for a sustainable growth situation, which, some people might just want a facility or two and they can get their hands on it, soup to nuts the whole way through. But it seems like for you, if you can tie something up, you get the investment thesis in place, you build the infrastructure so that the integration and lease up period and then stabilization period is taken care of, you're on to your next deal, which is great.
Right. And that's been tight. That's been tight over the last, since July, finding any deal for me, and we can talk about that. But any deal, and I can only speak from my experience, but I've looked at a lot of deals between there, and I do the quick back of the napkin on a lot, and everybody's feeling the pinch of the economy. So everybody wants to sell it for more than, because they need to pay their bills. And when I look at them, I do the quick back of the napkin, and I find out that, whoa, I don't. And a lot of people are concerned about cap rates, and a lot of people are concerned about this. And my first thing is, and Liam will tell you, I'll say, what does it do in a month? I don't care about, don't tell me what cap you're selling it at, what cap I'm going to be buying. I want to know what they're doing a month, because I know my expenses are going to be different. So to me, cap rate number, I don't care. A lot of people, that's all they focus on is the cap rate, So let's talk about, okay. So let's talk about mid-year last year, or even the beginning of last year through till now. Let's call it a year period from April, May last year to now, and what you guys have seen in the market.
Yeah, I think what I've seen after just looking at all different kinds of deals, different parts of the country over the last year, where I think you're really seeing the true operators shine. I think you're seeing the people that want to put in the elbow grease, like, the people like you who want to get in and do the dirty work. It's not always like the field of dreams, you buy it and they'll come and facility will lease up just because you slap a website on it. You actually have to manage it efficiently. You have to pay attention to it, offer rate specials, do advertising. I think the people that are actually spending the adequate time on the property and the management are the ones that are producing, and those are the ones that are leasing up at a strong clip, achieving the rates that they need to. I've seen so many facilities though that I have a listing right now. Some guy said it. He's like, I bought this a couple years ago and I got shiny object syndrome and the COVID craze of everything, and I thought it'd be a whole lot easier than it was. And I was like, all right, well, what are you doing to turn it around? He's like, well, not much. I was like, well, do you have any online advertising? No. Like, well, you got a lot of REITs around you. If you're not spending any money on online advertising or offering any rent specials to get people in the door, your occupancy is never really going to change. But I think, when you do evaluate the properties for the people that are a little more experienced or are dedicating themselves to it, those are the ones that are achieving the highest value. Those are the ones that are the best deals to get done. Obviously the ones that are 50% leased and need CapEx poured into it, there's a little more nuance to it and there's a little more creativity that needs to be done to get those deals across.
Some of the deals aren't the get rich quick, and some of them aren't even get rich long. Some of them are, make some money long, and maybe make some money up front, right? And when you get into a deal where, I mean, am I getting a bunch of mailbox money? No. Do I get some? Yes. I also have 16 properties. So, and they're all over, Texas and Arkansas and South Carolina and stuff. But it's not, I'm in for the long haul because of the way real estate goes, and it's going to increase over that long haul period, right? So am I expecting, some people want, turn around on cash flow right away, and that's fine. They, if they have the money to put into it, they want to get, look, I just want to get 6-7% back on my money, and they're going to go in all cash, and that's what they want, then hold it and do your thing. But as far as me, it's like, I'm in for the long haul. The one that we got down in the coast of Texas, by the time the 5-year mark comes around, it'll just be nice, ripe, and ready to go to start cash flowing heavily. And that's going to take me to 5 years to do it, right? Because we know well, you guys too, on this side of my screen, you guys know, you saw the paperwork, right? So So to me, it's not, would I like it that if I was bringing in, four or $5,000 a month from each one of my properties? Absolutely. But if I have an open mind, take all the lumps on the way, and then decide, okay, I'm either done with it or it's cash flowing. I can make my money on the back end, or I can make my money along the way, or both. So, so I like
I
it.
think as long as you're comfortable with your own, like as long as each owner or operator is comfortable with their own strategy, like you're saying, like you're in it for the long haul. And I think the work that you put into your facilities now will only set you up for greater success down the line. It's like the grass is green where you water it. And if you're watering it early on, it's only going to be stronger. Your
Yeah.
facility is going to be stronger, perform better, look better, achieve higher rents, achieve higher occupancy consistently as time goes on. So
And also, and what I think for you guys too is like, as you're seeing stuff, you're doing a lot of market analysis, right? More so than I would even as a person buying. Like I look at my 3 to 5, right? I look around me and I go, okay, what am I going to compete with? But you guys are seeing it all through, all the states and more than 3 to 5 miles. And when you got a deal that's coming up, and I know you give on the OM and stuff, you give that 3 to 5. But you guys are seeing that more so on a, being brokers and stuff. You guys see that on a bigger picture of saying, okay, this area is really doing well, and this area is like oversaturated, right? What are you finding out there as far as, especially like people bringing into the market, ground ups, right? People are building them and then coming to you and going, okay, it's done. And it needs to be leased up. I want to sell it and make my money and go. What
So
are you
I think there's
seeing?
like, yeah, I think there's like two parts to that question. So
Yeah,
one, I mean, storage is always going to be a trade area specific deal, right? You are pulling from your 135, your 5, 10, 15-minute drive time. So we are
right.
hyper focused on uh, trade area data, demographics, market analysis, 100%, especially when it comes to rates, tenant rates, supply, new supply. However, the beautiful thing about storage is you can take a market and you can look at all the overlying data, the demographics, the input, the rent per foot in a market, the supply demand equation, and you can compare it to other markets around the U.S. Right? So, I mean, assuming we're comparing apples to apples here, the tax situation is similar. You can look at it because larger buyers with capital are doing the same types of thing. Like, does this market mimic a market that we are very comfortable with? And we can actually deploy in. And then we can start looking at, okay, are my in place and stabilized metrics comparable to other markets we're seeing? For example, if you're looking at like East Texas versus Arkansas, if you're looking at different regions of the Mountain West, if you're looking at areas in the Midwest that are comparable in terms of property tax step up, because those can vary pretty heavily. But so we are hyper focused on the immediate trade area, but we do have the luxury of being able to compare markets to markets if the overlying demographics are similar. Unfortunately, what's kind of interesting is years ago, a West Coast market, even same demographics, same population density, average household income, in the Midwest, in a Texas market, whatever, completely different cap rates. Those have all narrowed and come in a lot tighter. Let's say it was like a 6 cap in Denver, you might find that same 6 cap in Little Rock, right? It's like based off of where my rents are at, the demographics, and the overlying data. So that's all come a bit tighter. And then in terms of new supply, I mean, this one's been tough. Like we did a bunch of CO deals in 22, 23 even. I've had a couple CO deals that sat on the market for a long time. And if you are a merchant developer, someone who is the whole plan is to build, and once that thing is built, sell, you better have a really good basis in it. You better have a kick-ass piece of real estate, and it's going to have to be in a very high rent market with high population density. Like this stuff works in Dallas, this stuff works in Austin, this stuff works probably in Northwest Arkansas, in some of these larger markets. But when you get to these secondary and tertiary markets, the risk profile is extremely high to try and sell at CO. and interest rates are way too high because you're having a serious interest carry for the first probably 3 to 5 years. Right now, across the board, occupancy has been hit, rate growth has been hit. A lot of that is from residential demand. Homes aren't transacting as much. About 40% of demand for self storage comes from residential demand. So it's really hard to bank on super quick lease up and super quick rate growth without that backstory. So I would be hesitant for folks looking to sell at CO. If you're able to offer some sort of creative financing, people like that. Hey, you get a little discount to market. I can do seller carry. We're doing a deal right now where we're doing 9 months on the front end, no interest payments that accrues gets on the back end. It's a seller carry deal. We're doing another deal with a CO where it's an equity rollover where they're going to sell but retain ownership as an LP. We can talk more about that later. But for those deals, creative financing is definitely a key factor there if you want to transact at CO.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people come in and they go, "Oh, I got a piece of property, so I'm going to throw some buildings on it." And I don't think that that's always like without reaching out to professionals, and I use you guys or even people who do market studies, and that's all they do. Um, that I me personally, I don't think that that's such a grand idea, right? Because especially if you're not in that market yourself, like you don't live there, and you don't go like, "Hey, there's no place to store stuff," you know. If you're not in that market, it's not just a good idea just to acquire a piece of land and say, I'm going to throw some buildings on it, tie up all that cash because and or get a mortgage for it. And then, now you have to have a working capital to pay your bills because it's got a lease up. That's why a lot of people say, "Hey, well, you looking for a new facility?" And I go, "No, I'm looking for something that's gonna at least come close to paying my mortgage.
Right.
I can get the rest of it to happen. If I'm off, I'll raise some extra money, put some working capital in there, cover a couple months worth of not delinquencies, the difference between my you know what I'm talking about. I'm trying to think of the word, but whatever. But it'll cover my loss in the temporary period. But when you're ground up and you're just throwing up some buildings, you could hold that for it could be 2 or 3 years that before you're seeing 88% occupancy.
And to
Hey,
add on
James,
that is
James,
Yes, sir.
sorry, go for it.
Hunter, before you go too much further,
Yeah,
what's the CO deal?
certificate of occupancy.
Oh,
So
okay. Okay.
But like a
so
ground up.
that's right at you open the doors, right? A certificate of occupancy is typically about the last condition you need before you can start leasing units. Sometimes people get their CO before they're finished a couple different things here and there, but basically that certificate of occupancy is like, okay, we built a storage facility, we're ready to start leasing units. And sometimes people sell, I mean, in 2020, 2021, 22, people were selling these things at, stabilized 7 caps or 8 caps. I mean, now you be double digits by year 5 if you want to sell something like that.
Right.
But to add on, James, what you were talking about with these, should I throw up another building or two? It's actually buyers, sellers, operators come to us a lot and say, well, I have an extra acre in the back or 2 acres. Should I put up a couple extra buildings? And the answer is always maybe. I don't know. We have
Right.
to, how's your occupancy? How's your tenant rates compared to the rest of the market? What does the overall supply look like? If you're in small town USA, 15,000 square feet can blow up a market or at least tip the scales. So
Right.
it always takes a little bit of thesis. Sometimes it's almost better to sell a property if you're very well leased, rates are positioned, and oh, by the way, I have this extra piece of land as a kicker, a sweetener to get the cap rate that you want to.
Yeah, and we've seen that so much in a lot of these, secondary, tertiary markets in Texas where there is low barrier to entry. There is ample land in these markets. They are high growth markets. There are a lot of folks pushing out of Houston, Dallas, Austin, in these East Texas markets or, nice towns that are hours outside of those, Dallas, Austin, Houston. And a lot of them have been overbuilt. There's been a lot of added supply, and that puts pressure on rates, especially in the challenging market right now where, you know, capturing those customers is tough, and maintaining those rates is tough. You see the added supply in a lot of these markets over the last 2-3 years, where it does have an impact. And to Hunter's point, in a 30,000 population, and the owner expands with 25, 50,000 square feet, that changes the market considerably.
Yeah,
I
because
think
they can do it over
on the
there.
flip side a little bit too on that, it's like sometimes they want to put up an extra building, but because they're sitting at 100% occupancy. However, their rates are 25% below the market. It's like, well, this is, you don't need to spend money here. All you just need to do is increase your rates, and you can grow your revenue and the value of your facility without physically doing it.
Right. And now your
And
occupancy drops
sometimes
down and your cash flow goes up.
right. And
Yeah.
sometimes, putting up that extra building or two buildings, whatever it may be, and especially in the secondary and tertiary markets, can kind of cannibalize the market. Because if your neighbor's doing the same thing, thinking, all right, I have some extra room, I'll put up another building too, that becomes a race to the bottom with rates, as opposed to a fully functioning at equilibrium market when everything's going well, everyone's fully occupied. All you got to do is just raise your rates, which you haven't done in a few years. Like
Right.
there's different ways to go about driving value at your facility. And sometimes just, people don't want to mess with the tenants that they do have, because they've been tenants for 5 to 10 years.
Right.
They're good friends, and I don't want to squeeze them. Like, all right, well, this is just the way you want to run your business, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong way, but sometimes there's better ways, and sometimes there's less better.
And what I say too in that situation is, I was like, are you running a business? Because, if I'm at 100% occupancy and you said something that kind of hurt my ears, and it said they haven't raised rate in years. And I was like, just
You're
doing
probably
my
like, show me those
underwriting.
deals, please.
Yeah, I'll take it, right?
Yeah.
Because like I hear that and I think to myself, well, 100% occupancy. What? No. No, like, okay, if they want to sell it, I'm game. But when I think of it, when I do my underwriting, I already have my increases in there. Like I already go, hey, this is what I plan on doing. It's a little difficult right now because of the economy, but that's okay, because what I do in my particular underwriting is I go in and I go, okay, so we got to get through this part of the economy right now, and it's going to take a year or so to get out. So what I do is I go, okay, get rid of my first 4-month increase that I was going to do, get rid of my 9-month increase that I was going to do, and let's go to month 13. Okay, so now I push everything out for a year, and that's how I do all of my underwriting now. And then even that 13 months, I'm putting in like a 3%. I'm not putting in like 10%. Where a couple years ago I was you were buying a property, month 4 I was raising it 10%.
Mhm.
And you can't do that now because people are tight on their wallets. So you got to plan out for those increases. So
I like that. That's a good strategy. I think that's very conservative. I think as an operator, we own some stuff just unrelated to Storage Exchange, but we tend to not touch rates for 7 months, even in a good market. I think that's probably a fair time, and maybe you're not pushing street rates, but it just depends heavily on what's my unit type occupancy. Are my 10 by 10s above 85%, 90%? Well, then they should probably get a push.
sure.
Or what's my overall facility occupancy? And I don't think you can be afraid of, hitting those ECRIs, hitting your existing clients, your existing tenants, slowly picking those up. And then if someone moves out, well, hey, drop that back down to the market average. Really, there's no harm in that. I think we used to have a delta between what am I charging, what am I really getting? Well, now sometimes, folks, we kind of inversed that ratio a little bit. Let's get our tenants up high. And then when these guy moves out, let's drop it back down, fill the unit back up. Let's hit them with a couple rate increases. And I've seen that happen a lot with some of the larger players. I think they're super focused on that, where a couple of years ago, maybe that wasn't the case.
Right. So I noticed too, and I see a lot of comments on people, on the Facebook groups and all that stuff, where I throw a comment in there and I say, look, you don't want to go in and raise rates even 2% all across the board, right? Don't do that. Go and look at what you're saying is like your 10 by 10s. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if your occupancy is high on there, all right, knock them at 4, 5, 6, 7%. right? And just hit those targeted ones. And then
Yep.
in a couple of months, review it again and go for your 5x10s or your or whatever, and make it a systematic thing where every couple of months you're, if you lose two people over here, you don't want to lose 50% of your occupancy, right? So, take whatever that area is, and we've and it's been successful for us in that, definitely. And I have my finger on the pulse for the Fulton property that we have. So it's been very successful for us because we have different, we have the big buildings that are enclosed, we have the open parking, we have the RVs, and we have a house, and we have so many different um, different types of rentals in there that we can go to one of them and go, okay, we're $80 below market, and we're 100% occupied. So we're going to charge all them $40 more, right? Whatever the percentage is, but we're going to go $40. They're not going to leave because it's $80 over there more, right? And if they do, well, then we just bring somebody in, and they feel like they're getting a deal. So it's a game. Unfortunately, it's not a game. I don't want to say it like that. Well, for me, it feels like a game, but it's
a game in the sense of you're constantly tinkering with optimizing rates and optimizing occupancy. I mean, I'd say storage is probably the revenue management is probably closer related to hotels than it is to other commercial real estate asset classes. Just the sheer number of tenants, move-ins, move-out. I mean, this could take us down a whole rabbit hole, but to avoid that, it's like kind of looking at the REITs who are using algorithmic approaches. The rates, trying to keep up with them would be nauseating, and they're constantly going up and down. But there are a lot of awesome off-the-shelf products now for single entity operators or mid-sized operators like ProRise and other things like that, where you can mimic algorithmic approaches to rate management with some of these products too.
Kind of like that app that you can get now that follows all the politicians and what they're investing in.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. So okay, so when you guys are you're presented with a property, somebody says, hey, or if you're talking to people, I guess you guys have different approaches. You go in and you say, hey, we've been keeping an eye on your property, and we want to see if you want to sell. Or somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to sell. What does that look like to you guys? Let's say that I came to you and I said, hey, I want to sell my property. What is that? How does it all come together? Not how do you get your leads, but kind of how do you get your leads? And then
I'll take that one. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, but just how, like, I'm curious from a buyer. I know how I get my leads. I get dumped in my inbox, or I get a phone call, or or I see it online, or somebody tells me about it. And so how do you guys go about approaching that?
We've been in the industry a long time, and I mean, we're a relationship business. It always has been. If you're not in real estate and you're not a relationship driven business, then I don't think you'll be successful in the long run. So same way as everyone do it, we meet with people constantly, and we understand, and we never do a hard sell. This is never like, it is time for you to sell now. But when someone comes to us or we go to them and we have a discussion where it's worth exploring, we approach it like a institutional buyer would approach a deal. We underwrite with trying to push it obviously to the maximum the market could bear, but with the lens of a sophisticated operator. Because when I go to articulate the deal story to the buyer pool, right, I need to explain it to them the same way they would explain it to their investment committee. And if I could do that, then I can create maximum transparency into the deal and maximum amount of competition into the deal. But furthermore, for you, James, you come to me and I say, here is your deal. Here's where you're struggling. Here's where you're doing very well. Here's where I think it would trade. Here's the value add. What we're doing is we're building a thesis. And we give you the range. We give you the number. Here's where I think it trades. But furthermore, we're also giving you or the buyer different levers to pull So either like the buyer comes in, they're pulling the levers, and that's how they get to the certain valuation. Or maybe it's like, as a seller, maybe I actually want to wait 3 to 6 months to sharpen up a couple things first. And it's an ongoing, a very dynamic process, but we approach it with the lens that's going to resonate with the buyers. Because if you resonate with the buyers, one, the buyers like you, and I think they appreciate the high level of data, but also it creates transparency and competition to your deal too, without a hard press sale. Sales, whether the market's right or not, it's up to the individual whether it's a good time for them personally to go through with something.
And what happens when you come in and you explain all that to the seller, and they're still going, yeah, but I want $2.5 million for a property that's 4 blocks away from mine, and
That's our
and
day
that
to day. Yeah.
it's not, and you can't justify it. What happens at that point?
I think a few things happen. We try not to just wave a high number in front of seller space just to get a listing, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what that does is it wastes time for all parties involved.
Sure.
It wastes time from the brokers putting the marketing together and talking to buyers. It wastes the buyer's time underwriting a $2.5 million deal or a $1.5 million deal, where the ask price is $2.5 million, and then it wastes the seller's time because it just sits there on the market. It's like, what do we do here except for waste time? If we can make these changes for these 3 to 6 months ahead of time, that $2.5 million becomes very feasible. If they are steadfast on their number because that's what they need to sell, that's fine. There's nothing we can really do. But if they're willing to actually listen to your evaluation as to why it's valued at where it's at, then we can have a fruitful conversation. I think we can say, here are the comps in the market. Here's why, your facility is worth $50 a foot because all the other facilities were $50 a foot. This is very general, but you can't get $100 a foot when no facility in the history of your market has ever sold there. You're asking for this pricing. Let me show you what a debt service payment looks like for this pricing relative to what your property brings in. And if you're at a 0.5 DSCR, you're never going to get the deal done. And I think, being able to point to that kind of stuff, point to the cap rate, point to the yields, different requirements that different buyers look for. But above all else, people aren't going to buy a property if you can't get a loan for it.
Right.
For the most part, you do have the cash buyers sometimes, but I think that DSCR metric has become a lot more prevalent over the last 2 years as interest rates have become a lot higher. Whereas a couple of years ago, it wasn't really consideration because interest rates were so low, and you could buy a 4 cap. You could do that because interest rates were below that, and you could get
Right.
away with making that debt service payment. I think those people are in a lot of trouble right now that paid the 4 caps, but
I think
I think,
in terms
if you can just reason with the seller, they might not like it and they say, you know what, I understand what you're saying, but it just doesn't make sense for me to sell for less than 2.5 million. So totally understand that. If anything changes, or if you want to work together to figure out ways to drive value at your facility, whether that's increasing the advertising, increase your occupancy, figuring out, rent specials to get people in the door to increase occupancy, and then we can get it situated and ready to go to sell that $2.5 million number, then great. But there's probably a chance we lose out on a lot of listings because we try to give accurate pricing guidance.
Because you're honest.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a good example here. It's hard. We fall into it, right? The idea of buying listings. I have a lot of very good, very smart broker buddies who we've talked about it. It's hard not to fall into that, right? You want to get the deal. We understand it might be a little aggressive. We try to stay away from it, but even some of the sharpest guys I know who I transacted with a ton at Red Dot fall into it. But I think a prime example is we won't use names, but there was a very large portfolio in Texas that we sold. You guys all know who the owner was. But Liam, why don't you tell about that story a little bit? And I think it's how a lot of our conversations end up going too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that all, starts with that objective opinion of value. We create the relationship and we come in, we do our underwriting and, we sit down with the seller and we give them, true, honest feedback and that objective opinion of value. And you know, the seller hears you out and is willing to listen to that and recognize that at the end of the day, if we price appropriate to market, the goal here is to create the most competition possible, which at the end of the day is going to generate that seller the greatest net proceeds. You know, the feedback we got, you know, from this, you know, they're a large regional operator in Texas, is, you know, we were the first brokers to come sit down in his office and give him true, honest feedback, and not, you know, have these super aggressive, you know, underwriting assumptions, and that ultimately generates a nice big juicy number, to get you excited. We were the first group that came in and did give him that honest feedback, and that integrity really resonated with him, and ultimately is what got us the listing. So that's, you know, really what we strive to do. Again, going back to what Taylor's point there was, like, sure, you know, we're going to miss out on some listings, and that's okay. You know, we try to warn those sellers as much as possible of like, look, we have sound underwriting here. We know what we're doing. I'd hate to see you take this to market at that much higher price and waste a bunch of time, and, you know, sour on a relationship that maybe you had, and feel frustrated that something didn't happen. And then you're back to square one, you know, after wasting several months there. So, you know, it's again, it always goes back to that, you know, it's the objective opinion of value. And if you're willing to sit there and hear us out, and, you know, the proof is in the pudding with, you know, the competition with deals is ultimately what does generate the greatest net proceeds for our clients.
Now, so I have two questions. One, do you have those people in the market who are the word comes to mind is slut, but the people who bounce around from broker to broker and always trying to sell their deal? Do you have those in the market?
Yeah, we get listings after the fact. We're weary about them for sure. You know, we want to take deals that have high probability of transacting. And when we say, like, we're giving an objective opinion, we also look at it as this is a start of a conversation. If I give my value, I've met with you, and you come back to me and say, Hunter, you're forgetting X, Y, and Z. What about this in the market? We need to talk about that. And I go, James, you're absolutely right. Like, we're not stubborn in our valuations. We're not prideful, no ego when it comes to it all. We're trying to make decisions based off data, but not everything lives in a spreadsheet, right? I mean, you guys know it. Your hands are on it. I mean, that's one part of it, and that's how deals start. But we're very open to the collaborative process here. When it comes to deals going back on the market, we're weary if they're willing to listen to the market, because that's where I can tell you anything. Liam can, Taylor can. You know, the REITs can tell you anything they want, but the loudest voice in the room is going to be the market. So
Absolutely.
if someone's willing to conform within a realm, then, you know, we'd play ball for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because sometimes I see that, you know, like I don't have a need to go to Crexi or to LoopNet and look for properties. Although I do have a couple flagged within the region of where I own properties, just because if they pop up on there, and it's a tool, right? If they pop up on there, I want to know what's up for sale. Just because, hey, maybe I can add this to my portfolio and maybe I can manage it out of the same place. Who knows, right? Maybe I can save on some cost. But I do see some of the properties that seem like they're bouncing around because I guess you would say they're stubborn on what price they want, right?
Yeah.
And they're not listening to the market.
Right. They're not listening to the market. And some are for certain reason. I mean, you know, I have a listing in the Mountain West, and, you know, we took it to market pre-certificate of occupancy, so before it was even done. And it was tough to sell at that price. And I made a decision with the seller. He's savvy, he understands, he's a cool guy. And we made a decision, like, let's take it off the market for a little bit. Let's see how lease up goes over the next 6-7 months, and then let's put it back, which we just did. It's in Wyoming, and it's getting a ton of traction. But so you take it off the market for two reasons. One, you're stubborn, you got a high price, or you have an intellectual conversation and a game plan with you know, the people you're close with and working with, and, you know, that can be beneficial and savvy too, on the other hand, you know.
So what do you guys find as the easiest part of your job and the hardest part of your jobs as realtors?
I want to hear Liam answer this one.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
I know
know,
you guys, and let me rephrase that in a way. And I know you guys are a higher level, but I want to count that too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that you guys don't beat the streets, and I don't want you to,
Yeah.
I don't want you to think that. That's what I'm saying. But, and I know Liam is out there, and you know, he's more on the buyer seller level, and you guys are kind of reining it all together. But I want to know that too. Like, what do you see, Liam, as your easiest part of your job, the hardest part of your job, and then you guys, being back at the office, finding out what the hardest part and the easiest part of what you guys are doing.
Before Liam caveats, we're all deal junkies. We're all on the road constantly.
Right.
So no matter where we sit, we're in the grind. But Liam,
yeah, it ebbs and flows. I think you look back at the last 12, 24 months, kind of going back to this discussion we're just having is your underwriting deals. You're looking at, dozens and dozens of deals, and you're still seeing that massive spread between seller expectation and, what the market will bear. And in those times, it feels like such a challenge where you're just not breaking through. You're chasing so many deals, you're making phone calls, you're out on the road, you're spending, a week away from your family, meeting with customers. And that's all stuff we love to do. Like getting in front of these folks is what we love to do. And that's really where you're creating a lot of value and creating relationships and progressing these conversations. Um, you know, Again, going back to like the last 12, 24 months, like there is still that huge spread. So you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall at times, and you're not pushing deals through. So that feels like the ultimate challenge is getting these deals to push through. And then, you get a couple that go through and you get under contract. And then you remind yourself that, oh man, actually, from contract to close is by far the challenging component. And the deals we've worked with you is, you go into it knowing, the short list of things you do have to tackle and get done to get to the closing. Inevitably there are hiccups and road bumps along the way that you got to figure out. You got to get creative with the buyer and seller to work out solutions to things that come up. And that always proves to be challenging. It's just, every day you wake up, you never know what's going to happen with the deal you got under contract. And it's always just working towards, those solutions that let's keep everybody calm. We're all working collaboratively here together. You're usually the intermediary between that buyer and seller and finding solutions to keep moving the deal forward. Sure, you get the straightforward ones that are no pain and you love those, but it is, again, remind yourself when you get busy with deals under contract, it is, from that contract to close, that is the journey and where a lot of the work is done. And I think that's where we do create a lot of our value. A lot of this discussion is about how we look at deals, our underwriting, our background in operations, but we've got a great team, from that contract to close point where we can, really manage any deals. We've, done some alternative asset stuff as of late too. That's provided some complex transactions. That's been a lot of great learning. But our team is really set up to tackle anything. We've sold all kinds of deals. Again, going back to some of the stuff that you've bought from us, we're working off of reports that are all handwritten on paper. And that provides those challenges of, we're fishing through filing cabinets to get documents that we need.
Right.
So there is a lot of value there, and that does get lost, in a lot of this stuff we do. It's not necessarily discussed when we're, out and about. We're out here in Vegas right now at these trade shows, and it's a lot about just deals, but a lot of the value there is the team we have in place to actually get these deals done once they're under contract.
What I tell everybody that I talk to is that my mentor, which we all know who my mentor is, my brother John, my mentor told me that every deal dies 10 times before you get it across the finish line. Okay. And every time you get ready and you think things are going well, it dies. And then you go, okay, stop. What are we going to do to keep this deal going? And we've seen that, where like, oh, the lawyer's asking for this, and you're going like, what? And then we have to provide something. So I try to tell everybody that's new into the business is, it's kind of like buying a house, except it's not, right? and that the deal's going to die when you're negotiating. You're going to say, well, okay, I want this, and they go, well, I want that, and then you go, well, no, I can't do that. Okay, well, let's create a way that we can, right? They want to get what they want, we want to get what we want, plus the lawyers want to get what they want, and the title agency wants to get what they want, and the city wants to get, and everybody wants to get what they want, and along that process of it, it's going to die.
Hmm.
Right? But and I noticed, because our deal that we've done together, they've died and they've come back to life, and they've died and they come back, and maybe the closing date gets pushed out a little further. How do you guys handle, I mean, I know how you do, but I want you guys to kind of put it in words. How do you handle when the deal dies, for whatever reason? Like what is, do it's not always, drop back and punt, because that's the last thing you want to do, because you're this far into it, this deep into going to closing, and the deal dies. How do you guys approach that, either mentally or team driven, or like, yes, come back and go, hey, let's get in the huddle, let's talk about this. Like, how do you guys deal with it?
I think that's like one of the best parts of the job and worst parts of the job all in one, because the ability to try and go through and go do the problem solving. It's like you'd obviously rather there not be any problem at all, but when those problems do arise, let's figure out a fun, creative solution to get through this. Let's not focus so much on the problem. Let's focus on the solution. And sometimes, like, those are the most rewarding parts of the deal, when you finally close it and you get through it. Is, man, I was able to navigate this situation. That's the fun stuff. It's like with brokerage, a lot of brokerage comes down to, you can't ever get too high, you can't ever get too low. So just keep your head, stay calm, be that voice of reason, that voice of calm for either the buyer or the seller, depending on, the situation, and just let them know, like, there is a solution through this. We're gonna put our heads together and we're gonna think about it, and we'll figure it out. It's really just like, when it comes to managing that relationship with the buyer, the seller, like, let's just, everyone stay calm. There's a way through this. I'd say 9 times out of 10, like you said, I'll talk to Hunter or Liam on a deal. I'll say, how's the deal going? It's on life support. It's dying. And then I'll check back in a few days later. I think we're back on track, and it happens every single deal, like you said.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it all fun and worth it. It's just maintaining your emotions, because when other people's emotions get high, you got to keep yours in check and be that guiding light, essentially.
And that's what I try to tell people, and that I talk to and meet and network with, that are getting into the business, saying that, it's not going to be as easy as going in and paying cash for a car, walking up and going, I want this, it's now mine. Okay, bye. There's going to be challenges along the way, that a lot of people that are new into the industry, that they don't know what they don't know. Right. So, and that's why I do these videos, is so that I can help them understand that eventually you're going to stumble, you're going to trip, you're going to, something's going to happen in that deal making process, and you want to be able to deal with it. Right. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think
Cracking
that
me
if
up
you
right
really,
now, looks like he's walking on the moon.
yeah, he's
Walking on the moon?
floating in outer space.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a quick question to ask you guys.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a deal that, you had out there on the market, and buyer comes to you and say, hey, what about creative financing? Like, will the seller carry any part of the note? Have you guys had that? And how was that process?
Yeah, all the time. So back on the Taylor's point, Liam's point, we love the creativity. I'd say that's something that we thrive at here and strategize about quite a bit. Seller financing is super prevalent and has been on the rise since interest rates started climbing. That is obviously going to come down to, what is the seller's motivation and what does their in-place financing structure look like? Because a lot of times they have a high loan amount left on their asset, and the loan to value on the seller carry is just not going to make sense for the buyer. If you have a $3 million deal and they have $2 million of debt, you don't want to come out $2 million of cash and have them carry $1 million. It just, your LTV is going to be messed up. But we've been doing a handful of other creative solutions. We have set up loan wraps where you keep the existing debt in place. Seller technically stays on title to a portion, and he carries a larger seller carry note. So there's arbitrage there between what you're paying the seller and what he is paying in debt service. We have done equity rollovers where, again, we either do a membership interest agreement to keep the existing debt in place, or say you're selling it for $1 million and the seller says, I'll take 500 in cash, but I'll keep 500 as a limited partner, and you pay them some sort of preferred return. But seller carries, again, like, maybe it's short-term seller financing, so that you can get to a point where you can refi. But we structure these types of deals all the time. One other thing that it seems like sellers might be open to, it's typically, it's kind of the last straw if you're trying to work a seller financing deal, but maybe doing a seller carry deal in second position, usually not the preference of a seller, so that they're carrying behind a first mortgage. It's a little more risky, right? I wouldn't feel that great about it, if you have the note to pay first. But the point is, like James is saying, you understand everyone's motivation. Okay, and then you start piecing the puzzle together. Well, what can work? What different levers can we pull? What different tools can we use to make it work?
And you don't know what you don't know, so you have to ask the questions.
Yeah.
You have to say, hey, okay, my numbers would work if I had a 6% interest rate. Would they consider carrying seller finance? And obviously, as you're in the business and you're I don't want to say stretched out, but when you're borrowing money left and right, all these different places, it helps to be able to go in and find somebody that has seller finance, so that you can get, one, at lower interest rate, two, you're not tapping a bank right now for money that's going to show up on your business account and saying, oh, look, they have more debt. Maybe that's not right for you right now. Maybe you have investors and you can get a seller finance deal and you can pull that investor money in and not have to use that investor money, and you can use it for repairs or whatever. So and we've done creative financing. I mean, it's to me, that's with anything. Like, I try to do creative. I want to use other people's money as much as I can.
I'm seeing so many of these what I'll call syndicators, which obviously that's a kind of a buzzword in the storage world, where syndications are basically, let's say Taylor and I have this pool of capital, we find a deal, and then we do a joint venture and just say who's in, who's out, and we take their money and they're the LP and we go buy a deal.
Right.
But it seems like they're finding ways to put as low or small amount of cash into the deal as possible, whether that's through an equity rollover, financing, whatever tool they can use. But it does boost your cash on cash if you can do that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about what do you guys see in the market. I know we're a little bit over, and I don't want to keep you guys too long because I know you guys are busy. But what are you seeing in the market right now? And what do you think that and I'm not even say predict, but what do you think the changes are going to be, or what are you hoping the changes are going to be? Something like that.
But it is hard. We have this conversation. You sit down with someone, everyone says, where do you think this thing is going to settle? And it's really, really hard to know, especially for a broker. It does seem like buyer and seller expectation is coming a little bit closer together. I don't think if interest rates keep dropping, I don't think valuations are just going to shoot up. I think what's going to happen is occupancy will get a little bit better because we'll see residential demand increase a little bit. Rates are going to come back to life a little bit. And the deals we're trying to sell right now, the spread will tighten. So I think if some folks are holding on only for the dream of lower interest rates and thinking their value is going to go up 30, 40% or whatever, probably not going to be the case. There's still a ton of people raising dough and buying assets, especially in these mid-tier markets, as long as there's a good story, as long as supply is not out of whack. It feels like from at least a storage exchange standpoint and the deals that we're transacting on, we're getting more and more offers closer to list and ask price, and deals are happening at a little bit better clip than say last year. Taylor, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like the market goes, I was talking to someone at the trade show yesterday. It's like anyone that tells you, if anyone tells you with any clarity what they think is going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months, they're full of it. I think anyone like, we can all make predictions, but I don't think there's really any clarity as far as what's going on with the market and the economy. But I think what we will more or less see is a slowdown in new supply. At least that's what I'm hoping. I think we need some time for the market to recalibrate and get back to the stronger occupancy levels and the stronger rate levels that we have been relatively accustomed to. I think there's going to be, and there has been over the last, I think, 12 months and moving forward in the next 12 months, more of a return to the fundamentals of investing and buying real estate. I think people got away from it because interest rates were so low and occupancy was deceivingly high and rates were deceivingly high, and it wasn't always going to sustain. So I think people are looking at it more of, from a fundamental basis of where are my rates going to be? What should I be underwriting my occupancy to, my pro forma? Hopefully with interest rates coming down, hopefully they do come down, the housing market will pick back up. And I think we all know that the storage market is very heavily tied into the housing market. So when people are buying and selling homes, moving, that's the best time for storage. So hopefully we see a little bit of bounce back on that front too.
Is there any properties that you guys want to promote, push, or get out there? I mean, I could even do a real quick separate video on that and just post that by itself if you want to do that, so that somebody doesn't have to sit through our whole conversation to find
I
out.
don't want to do a huge PR campaign. I think this is more about trying to inform the audience and introduce ourselves. I appreciate it. I love free marketing. I'd say reach out to us. We have tons of off-market deals. We enjoy the chance to meet, talk to each and every one of you. We have a giant buyer database. We'd like to learn, hey, what's your buy box? What are you looking for? We probably have something off-market that fits, or if not, go to our website, storageexchange.com. We have all of our active listings there. If you haven't signed up, you can sign up for free and you get email notifications. You can execute NDAs. But come and talk to us and let's explore different ways that we can work together, whether that's on the analysis side, whether that's positioning for a sale, whether that's whatever you're looking to buy. We'd love to help you out for sure.
On top of that,
I will post that. I will post all your links together and everything.
Yeah.
And the same way I did on the pre-game announcement. I'll post all that with it as well.
Cool.
I do appreciate you guys being part of this. Also learning what you guys do, trying to help everybody in the storage industry. And then obviously I'll be in touch because, Liam and I we probably talk once a month at least. Right.
Sure.
And,
Yep.
And we'll keep that relationship going. I do appreciate you guys coming on. Let me know how Vegas is. Obviously I didn't go. I'll be out there again. I'll be out there twice this year already. So I didn't want to go 3 times. It's just
that's
Vegas.
Too much to be in Vegas.
It's not it's not that exciting for me anymore. The first couple times I was like, woohoo, and now I'm like, plus with these eyes, woo, no man. So I appreciate you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and end us here, and we'll talk soon. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate it.